with that being said, I would really like to introduce our very first speaker, Haroon. He's a Harvard Law graduate, serial entrepreneur, and angel investor. And so he's founded webs.com, and he's also grew to about 50 million users, and also founded Truebill. He's also acquired for 1.3 million, and he's also passionate about tech and has invested in over 100 startups. So please feel free to join me in welcoming Haroon as he gives us his experience in Truebill.
Oh, I have this. Is there a clicker? All right, Assalamu alaikum. Good to meet all of you. It was very enjoyable to meet many of you one-on-one earlier as we were hanging out, and I look forward to seeing folks at I heard there's an after party? Yeah? You guys going to be at the after party? All right. Okay, my name is Haroon. I'm a serial tech entrepreneur. So I've built and sold several companies. Webs was one. Another one was called Minder or Salam's dating app. And then the most recent one was Truebill, which is now called Rocket Money. So I thought, what could I do? And I thought the best thing to do is just basically tell you exactly all of the secrets of what we did to build and grow this company so that as you guys grow your companies, you have a leg up. So in this is a dense, and I don't have a ton of time, so it's going to be fairly dense. I'm going to try to go through quickly so we have a little time for questions. But if most businesses would do quite well if you just understood what was in this presentation. You ready for that? All right, just from a timing perspective, we started Truebill at the very end of 2015 to early 2016. We were in Y Combinator 2016. Plug and Play invested in us in that time. We sold 5 years later for over $1 billion. So it was a very rapid growth company. All right. So this is a tweet that's basically the summary of the whole thing. And if you are interested in following it, just at Haroon if you want to follow me on Twitter. And I post on tech stuff and Gaza. So those are like the two things I post about. So thinking about starting a business, there's 4 questions you need to ask. Is your idea feasible? Will someone pay for it? Is the cost to acquire one of those people much less than how much they'll eventually pay? And then how many of those people can you get? Okay? So in business terms, there's acronyms for those. So is it feasible? The MVP, minimum viable product, is kind of the thing you get out there to see if this thing exists, can you actually build it? Will people use it? How much will someone pay as the lifetime value of the client? That's how much money they're going to pay you over time. What's the cost to acquire them? That's called CAC. And then how many of those are there? TAM is the total addressable market. So when you go to pitch investors and stuff, you say they'll say, what's the TAM? It's just what is if every single person who needed this got it, what is that number? So those are the 4 things you need to worry about. So step 1, is it feasible? This is what it looked like when we started. It was me and my brothers literally in the basement. Now we had started and sold some companies before this. We got back in the basement and said, okay, what are we going to do with our lives? And we were tossing around ideas. We called this the floundry because we wanted to flounder on ideas. And so we just threw up a bunch of bad ideas. One of them, we were like, what if you had a VR headset and a bicycle, like a stationary bike, and you could bike while in VR, really dumb ideas. And this one came up, and so every company or thing that I've started or been involved with starts with a problem that I personally am attached to. And I think that's a really good way to do things because you're motivated because the problem bothers you personally. So in this case, I had a problem being able to track my subscriptions. Is the sound going in and out or is it okay? Should we switch it to mic or? You're good? We're good? Okay. All right, let me know if it's bad. So I had a problem tracking my subscriptions. And I was like, how is there no app where you can just connect your bank accounts, it looks at all those transactions and just tells you what subscriptions you have? It's a fairly simple thing. And I went to mint.com, and they didn't have it, even though they tell you all about your finances and stuff like that. So what if we did that? And so we just came up with this idea, and we called it Bill Ninja initially, and we had this platypus, duck-billed platypus, ninja thing. And then a couple weeks later, we're like, that's too cheeky. Let's call it Truebill. And we built just a website, actually. It wasn't even an app originally. But what was interesting was in the first algorithm we built, we all found subscriptions that we were paying for that we didn't want. So I was paying for a security service on a house I had moved out of, $40 a month for like a year. So it's $500. The reason that was happening is because we went from paying with credit card, paying with cash, to paying with check, where you balance your checkbook, to then paying with credit card and getting statements, to going paperless statements, and then card on file. So we went from a world where you knew where every dollar goes to a world where actually a lot of your money is just being drawn from your account without you knowing it. So it was a visibility problem, and this solved that. We launched it on something called Product Hunt. We just threw it up here just to see if people would like it. It ended up being the fourth most popular product that month. And so that's how we knew, like, okay, there's something here. There's some interest here. So then we applied to Y Combinator. We got into Y Combinator, moved the company to the Bay Area. And this is my brothers here working at Y Combinator. And this was our first office in San Francisco. So very small, humble beginnings, as most companies should be. So then the second question, business model and LTV. Now, this was interesting because we thought the business model would be an affiliate model, meaning people would log in the app and then we'd say like, hey, here's like something you could get at some financial product or something, we can make money that way. But we could not make money like that at all. No matter what we tried, like we were at maybe 20K a month we got to, and we couldn't grow it. And so really the company was about to die. And out of desperation, we basically said, we have one shot at like one more thing we can try. And so we said, okay, why don't we try a subscription model? And I had resisted that the entire time because of how ridiculous that is to have a subscription cancellation service that you pay a subscription to. I mean, if you had pitched that to me, I'd been like, that's the dumbest idea ever. So this had been pitched before, and I was like, no, we're not doing that. It's too ironic. Like, we're not doing it. But death was on our doorstep, and so we said, like, well, we're going to die anyway, so let's try it. And when we did, you could see what happened to the chart. The blue line there was our subscription revenue. And so the second we turned that on, that ended up becoming the business model. But really, like, I would love to say, like, I'm so smart and I figured that out, but it was not. It was out of desperation, and we almost died. And that was the only reason I was willing to even try it. But it turned out that this ended up being the greatest move we ever did. Why? Because unlike Mint, which was like an affiliate model, where finally the end customer is actually the affiliates that you're selling to, for us, we didn't have to worry about taking our app and jamming all these ads and stuff into it. We said, okay, people are paying us directly. That means we can just build the best possible app we can build, and people just pay us for that. And so it really aligned our incentives with our customers. So then it was like, okay, we finally have something. Maybe we can actually, we had raised a little bit of seed money after Y Combinator, but maybe we can finally raise an A round. This is what the company looked like at that time. So a few more people. That's me in the middle there. And so we went out to pitch our A. Now, you know, unlike most founders, I had this background because I had already sold the company for $100 million, Webs. So I was like, I'm just going to waltz in here and kind of name my price. And we said, we're going to cast a wide net. So we talked to everybody. I mean, at least we had 50 different pitches. And we got 50 no's. 50 no's, okay? And so many of these people I knew, I was on boards with them because I'm also an angel investor, so I knew them from that. They basically said, look, we love you guys, but we hate this business. And no one has ever succeeded here, and no one ever will succeed here. And one of them said, Haroon, just give me a blank piece of paper with any other business on it, and I'll invest it, but not this one, please. And that hurt, and it kind of made me really want to make this successful. So I was like, you'll rue the day. So anyway, we did that, and finally we got one offer. And this was our original investor from Webs, had a fund called Coda Capital, and he basically said, we said we want to raise 5. He's like, I'll give you 2.5. And, you know, you got to find the rest of the 2.5 somewhere else. And so we squeezed by, put the round together, and we raised $5 million. So kind of seat of our pants there. I actually had to loan the company money because we ran out of money. So we were almost dead. And what I decided, since this was my second company, is I really want to make it a mission-driven company. And I think that's actually quite important. And so we said, we're going to meaningfully improve the financial lives of millions of people. And what that was really useful for is like, what's going to get people to come to your company and get up in the morning is not, oh, our revenue went up by 5% last month. It's like, well, what are we actually doing in the world? And so this is what we said we're going to do in the world. And what I regularly do at every company meeting now is I bring testimonials and I show them how people are saying we're doing the thing that we said we're going to do. Where people say, oh my God, this has changed my life to have visibility over my finances and things like that. All right. So then we get to this thing of like, okay, how much do you make per customer? And that's your LTV. And then gross margin is just like after you take out all the costs, right? So how much you make per customer times gross margin over how much does it cost to get those people? And so, there's a little error there. But basically, your gross LTV, so gross margins, your LTV, and your CAC, right? That's the equation that we said we need to run. So, for example, if I could spend $1 and then $2 I get back, right, after all my costs and stuff, you've just made $1 on that dollar spent. And so we said, all right, well, what is our actual equation in the company? And I got very mathematical about this. So I said, okay, we have premium users and a number of months that they stick around for. And the premium users is like how much we make per month, minus how much it costs, minus the ones that don't pay, there's bad debt. And then the average number of months you get is 1 over your churn rate, so that's where churn comes in. And then our cost per acquisition, there's paid signups, organic signups divided by the cost, that gets our cost per install. And then you have a conversion rate that gives us our cost per premium. And then we had some extra affiliate and bill negotiation revenue. So we said, that's kind of like just helping pay for marketing. So we'll subtract that from marketing. And we end up with our LTV over our CAC. So that was our equation. Now, what was really cool about this is everyone in the company could know where they are in the equation, how they fit, right? So I could go to someone and say, what is your job? What is your fundamental job? And when we taught this to people, someone in the bill negotiation team who's trying to increase the revenue per bill says, oh, I'm right here in the equation. Or someone who's working on retention on the product side says, I'm here trying to reduce the churn rate, right? And if I reduce the churn rate, you could see how that factors into the equation. So everyone can see how they fit in the company. And then what we did is we modeled and said, okay, well, a 1% improvement on each of those things on the last slide, how much does that actually increase our equation by? And you'll see that some things, like the price, the ASP, a 1% improvement actually improved it by even more than 1%. But something like on our cost of goods sold, a 1% improvement barely gave us, it didn't have the leverage. And so once we understood where the levers are, obviously if I said, well, where do you want to put your resources? We said, we're going to put it here. So you might say you could do a bunch of cost-cutting measures, but when we looked at this, we're like, it's not worth it. Let's put all of our engineering resources on retention, conversion, LTV, that kind of stuff, CAC. And then the other thing that matters is the payback period. So even if you put $1 into this machine and you're going to get $2 back, well, if you get $2 back but it takes 10 years to do that, that's actually not that great. And so you need to know, like, how quickly do you get it back? And specifically, as you're burning money as a startup, when do you get that $1 back? And so we tried to say, all right, we want to get that back within a year. So I put $1 in. Within a year, I have $1 back. And then after that, everything that comes in off those users that I got from that initial spend is kind of all profit and gravy. And so we created a chart and really tracked this carefully. So these are all cohorts. And this is basically like our CAC LTV. And it was like 1 year CAC LTV and 3 year CAC LTV. And so we'd say we want this to be back like 100% kind of, this line. And this line to be over 3 years, let's say over 200%, it's so double. And then this dotted line is how much we're spending on marketing. And so we track this maniacally every month. And we had models that would say, okay, this cohort, what do we predict it's going to be? And then we'd look at the actuals and make sure that the actuals are kind of following the prediction. And that way we could very confidently spend on marketing. We could tell the marketing team, like, yes, we think that group of users you just brought in is worth this much, so that they could do their job. And so this is how this actually works. If you've got, let's say you make $60 from your customers over time and you spend $20, then your LTV CAC is 3, right? You've made 3 times. But at $60, you might be able to only spend $1 million at this kind of rate. And so you get 50,000 customers. And that 50,000 customers is worth like 3 million in LTV. But if you spend $90, if you can spend $90 on a customer, then suddenly I can spend a lot more money, right? Because just think about it, it's an auction when you're spending on Facebook or Instagram or something like that. So the more you can spend per user, which is this CAC number here, the more you can spend a user, the more you can spend in total on marketing, right? So let's say you're at let's say these are installs. So $20 an install, I can spend $1 million. At $30 an install, I can spend $3 million. At $40 an install, now I've really jumped over most of the competitors, so I can spend $10 million. And at $60 an install, I can spend $18 million. But the reason you can't just jump to this is because you need the equation to work. So the LTV has to actually be there. So what we realize is, okay, the way to win is if we can increase this LTV, then we can increase this number. And as long as we get to an equation here that we're happy with, we're going to be able to spend more and more on marketing, and we're going to grow faster. Now, in this set, right, you'd probably pick this one because here you're spending $10 million on marketing and you're adding $30 million in LTV. On this one, you're spending $18 million. You're only getting 36 back. So there's an optimization equation that happens there. And so normally, you're thinking the goal of the company is we want to spend as little as possible on marketing. We want organic, we want stuff like that, but we don't want to spend money on marketing or sales. We want to spend as little as possible. What we realized is that was wrong. The goal in our company was to spend as much as possible on marketing. So we told the marketing team, listen, you have parameters. You've got to be, let's say it's $30 or $40 or $50, whatever the parameter is, of how much they can spend per customer. But in that, you have no budget. Your goal is to spend as much as humanly possible, and my job is to go and raise enough money to be able to afford that. And so that's what we did, because this wasn't a viral app. It wasn't like someone gets the app and they like blast it out. It's a kind of more private thing. People talk. Sure, some people tell their friends, but it's not like a social network that's super viral. That's not how fintech is. And so we said the only way we're going to grow super quick is if we actually are able to market that way and market profitably. Now, this sounds odd, but think about this. If I had a machine here, if I had a box here, and I put $1 in, and then a year later the dollar came out, and 2 years later $2 came out. If you had that box, how much money would you put in that box? Yeah, you would just put as much as you could possibly put in the box. Right? And so the only reason you can't is because certain channels basically fill up, right? You just saturate channels. You got to keep finding more channels. So it's real work to be able to spend that. But we went from spending $10K a month on marketing to $100K a month on marketing to $1 million a month to now we spend over $10 million a month on marketing. That's what it takes to grow that quickly in this type of app. And that's something I didn't quite understand. It's much easier to just look out there and be like, that app must be an amazing product and that's why it's doing so well. That's not true. You have to have, the basics is you have to have a good product. And I'm not even going to talk about product here. I love product. I was the head of product, and so I had product experience. We built a good product, alhamdulillah. But the reason we beat everybody else was because of the machine, the growth machine we built, the distribution machine. And most startups that win have figured out this piece of it, the distribution piece. Is not just about the product. And you can be a worse product even and still win if your distribution's way better. All right? You guys get that? I wish someone had taught me that like 15 years ago. Okay, so what did we need to do that? We had a very data-oriented team, including the marketing team. Like our head of marketing was a data person, actually, not like a fancy brand person or something like that. Very data person. And we wanted to remove dependency, so we embedded data people in the marketing team itself. So they didn't have to put out a request to the data team and wait 2 weeks to get the answer back. They had their own data people. And the whole company knew that one of our goals is you have to support the marketing team on what they need to succeed. And so we also had a relentless focus. Part of our resource is just building product and making it great. But then another part was dedicated to just moving the metrics in that equation. So we did a lot of A/B testing to get there. Okay, a lot of A/B testing. A/B test is like, you go through the sign up process, and there's one screen that tells you to upgrade, and there's another screen we're showing you both of them, and then we're looking at the metrics to see which one did better. And we did this a lot. And so in order to do that a lot, what you actually do is have to build the thing that makes A/B testing really easy. So we had a system where an engineer could make it an A/B test by just adding one line of code. And then we had a system where the turning on and off the test could be done through an interface by the product managers, so the engineer didn't have to touch it. And then all the data went into Amplitude, and so the product managers could look, so you didn't need analytics either. So the product manager could invent a test idea, give it to the engineer would build it with one extra line of code, so they'd build the two things and put the line of code there. Then the reporting, the product manager could put it on, let's say they put it on 5%, kind of make sure it's doing well, then put it to 50-50. That looks like it's doing well. And all the time they're looking at the reports themselves. And then if it's a winner and they like it, they can set it live. So there was no dependencies in that process. Whereas normally there's all these dependencies. Okay, the engineer has to build it. Then, we need data to look at it. Then, okay, turn it on some. The engineer has to turn it on. Then the product manager looks at it. Is it good? Then it's like, okay, how's the data looking? And you're going back and forth. We said if we're going to be doing hundreds of these, we need to make that as easy as possible. And so that's what we built. And this was like a massive competitive advantage over our competitors. And then finally, depending on your payback period, you need growth capital. Now, there's some companies where, let's say you're selling annual subscriptions, so you're getting that whole year up front. You might not need a lot of capital to do it. But for us, because it was mostly monthly subscriptions, it would take time for the money to come back in. So we needed money that we could spend, and then it would come in later. And so that's what we did. So we went and raised our Series B. This was actually a funny story. There was a guy who emailed us, cold email. His name was Todd Boley. Never heard of the guy, never heard of his firm. He said, hey, I'm really interested in you guys. Would love to talk, whatever. And we're just like, who is this clown? But then my brother was like, let's just talk. Maybe I'll just quickly email him and just see what this is about. So, okay, fine. Can you talk on Tuesday? And he's like, oh, Dodgers are opening Tuesday. Can we talk Wednesday? And he's like, what the heck? Why? How could he, if he's interested, he shouldn't be doing that. He's like, let me just look him up real quick. He looked Todd Boley, owner of the Dodgers. He's like, oh, okay. So we talked to them. They really liked us. We ended up being one of their first angels, but now they actually do a lot of startup investing. And we raised $15 million. Now, the other thing that was interesting here is this was super stressful. Again, we were going to run out of money. This deal was stalling. And then I had been scheduled to go to Hajj. So I basically, it's the most stressful time. And I'm like, I got to go to Hajj. So I told my brother, I'm like, look, I'm handing this off to you. I got to go to Hajj. Close it. So I go to Hajj, and I just stopped thinking about this, actually. I was dealing with my own spiritual journey. Finish the Hajj, alhamdulillah. Get to Medina. And I'm sitting in the mosque, Nabawi Mosque, a masjid. I open my phone just to check emails, and the DocuSign is there for this. And so I signed it, and subhanAllah, it says Medina, Saudi Arabia as the location, geolocation for that. So alhamdulillah, sometimes you take care of your spiritual matters, and Allah can take care of your other matters for you, and that definitely happens. And then it was TAM. And TAM was really interesting because the biggest objection that every investor said is the TAM's not big enough. Okay, I get that you got to 100,000 users, but those are the super early adopters, and you're going to run out. And you're never going to be able to spend more than 200,000 on marketing because there's no people that want this. They were kind of right and they were kind of wrong. They were right in that budgeting apps, most people don't want to use budgeting apps. Hardcore, budget every little expense and stuff like that. What we had stumbled onto, though, is something else. Our app was focused on helping people not waste money. And there's nobody that doesn't there's nobody likes wasting money. And no matter how much money you have, you still don't like wasting money. It's just a thing. And so we ended up attacking a much larger market than we knew and that any of the investors knew. All right, so then we moved to DC, where I'm from, and this is us building. This is after Hajj. See, I shaved my head. And look, I just want to show you what this is like. We were building the desks at lunch. Like we were just sitting and building these standing desks because it was like cheaper to do that. So that's my head designer and that's me. And like at lunch break, we would just like put the desks together. This was our grand opening. Those are my daughters there. Um, and this was the size of the company at that point, right? So now it's like 25 people or something like that. And then this little thing hit. So everything's going great. And then this thing happens. And fortunately, we already had hired a lot of engineers across the country, and so we were prepared to go remote, but we had to go full remote. And I got to say, it was a hard time. I mean, like, basically, I would wake up in the morning, and the calendar's just full of meetings, and it's just, I'm in my desk just on Zoom, like, all day long. It was rough. But we went through that. And in that, there was a lesson. Do you guys remember the PPP? Does anyone remember that? Basically, for startups, entrepreneurs, they had a thing where basically, if if you're impacted by COVID, you can get these loans from the government that you might not even have to pay back. So you can get a couple $1,000,000. So every VC was calling every founder and saying, "Hey, you should apply for this PPP loan. It's very broad. You should do it." And so they told me, and I said, "All right, I'll look into it." I looked into it. I have a law background. I looked legally. It seemed like we were in a gray area, but we weren't hurt really by COVID. Like the business, but were we impacted by COVID? Sure, everyone's impacted by COVID. And then finally, I called them back. I said, "Let's do a board meeting." I called them together. I said, "I'm not taking the money. I'm not gonna apply for it." And they said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, I think we can apply for it, but there's a fixed amount of money here. So fundamentally, like if we get this money, the person at the tail end of this, there's some business at the tail end that's not going to get it, and there's a good chance that they actually need it more than us." And so I said, "I don't think we should do it." And then I said, and one other thing, and that is that one day I'm going to be on a stage talking about this company. And what do I want to say on that stage? Do I want to say I took the money or I didn't take the money? I said, I want to be able to say that I didn't take the money. And so the payoff is today I get to say we didn't take the money, right? Now, sometimes it is hard because you're trying to kind of like survive as a company, but also doing the right thing sometimes is really good because the U.S. ended up cracking down on a lot of these companies that took PPP money, and this is still a nightmare for people. And even now, there was conversations that came to Rocket about this, and we were able to be like, we weren't involved in any of that stuff. We didn't touch it. So, alhamdulillah, it worked out. Okay, but during COVID, we raised another round. This is from Bessemer. One thing that's really interesting is that no investor that we pitched and said no ever invested in us in future rounds. So every round we got was like the only investor we hadn't talked to. And that was interesting because we would tell them, we're going to do great, we're going to do this. They'd say, okay, we don't want to invest. And then we would do exactly what we said we were going to do, come back to them, and they'd be like, yeah, we should have invested, but now it's like so expensive that we don't want to invest anymore. So we had to always find new people. So we did this round with them, and this is what the company looked like when we hit 1 million premium members. So that was the company, and we had these trucks driving around with ads on them. And one of the lessons that we learned, back to this kind of like marketing thing I was talking about, is that size is actually not a moat. This is what our growth rate looked like, okay? And this is Mint here, which had dominated in the green. They had completely dominated the industry for a decade, and you could see how rapidly we just ate their face, like ate through their market share. So and they shut down earlier this year actually, so we completely killed them. But that's what happens if you figure out your acquisition strategy, your distribution strategy. And then finally, in early January, this was announced in June, but we had raised earlier. Excel put in a Series D round, $45 million. So that was the first time we felt like, okay, like we have actual real breathing room in the company. I want to talk about this concept of tawakkul a little bit, which is you've got to trust sometimes in things that are just beyond your control and beyond your knowledge. When we were close to dying, NerdWallet made us an acquisition offer. They said, we want to buy the company. And we said, okay, yeah, we want to sell the company. This company is worthless. They said, okay, what do you want? We said, well, look, we raised it like 8 to 10, so we'll sell for $8 million. And we're even willing to do like half cash, half stock, something like that. they came back and they're like, we'll give you 6 million. And we were like, no, 8's our minimum. They're like, okay, then we'll just build the thing ourselves. If they had said, yeah, we'll do 8, we would have signed that deal. And at the time, I was really like hurt that like subhanallah, like Allah, like it was just 8 million. Why couldn't you have allowed that to happen for us? And then like a year later, Gusto came and said they want to buy the company, and we had talks all the way through senior leadership. We said we want 65 million for the company. 65 million, like I really don't think, it was just like, I don't know how big this company gets. We'll take 65. We got really close, and then they said no at the end. And I was like, subhanallah, Allah, like how, like why? Why are you doing this to me, right? I guess we're going to have to keep building this thing. And imagine if they had said yes, we would have sold the company, right? So the point is like you don't know fundamentally. You do not know. You don't know what Allah has in store for you. Your job is to continue going down the path and trusting in Allah. Ribbit. We pitched Ribbit 5 different rounds. Seed round, Series A, Series B, Series D, Series C, Series D. Guy, Mickey Malka, great guy. Every time he'd be like, oh, you guys are crushing it, but, now it's too expensive. Oh, you guys are crushing it. He would send us wine. Okay, like he was doing everything. Don't worry, I didn't have it. We let employees take it. And so I'm just like, what a waste of time pitching him that many times, right? Well, let me say, yeah, okay, I'll get to that in a sec. But then at a certain point, right, Tawfiq comes and Rocket approached us at the end of 2021. Said we're interested. The CEO was the first call, which is a very good sign when the CEO is involved in the acquisition. And we decided to sell the company. People ask, well, Haroon, why did you want to sell the company? Look, at the end of the day, I had to ask myself this question. The next stage would have been, and we had a deal on the table to raise 100 million, really good deal. And after that, the next stage would have been to go public. So the question was, do you want to take this company public or not? And what I fundamentally thought about was, okay, I think if I'm going to be running a public company, it should be my life's work to be like that focused in it. And at that point, I was like, I don't think this is my life's work. I think this was a really important thing. But I wanted to be financially independent and things like that for a different purpose, which is to go and actually have influence and hopefully shift the world in a better direction. So we did this. Now, So we said yes, and we sold the company at the end of 2021. And I asked Jay Farner, the CEO, I said, how did you, why did you approach us? Like, why us? Like, there's many other people. How did you hear about us? He said, I'm friends with this guy named Mickey Malka from Ribbit. And I asked him, who is, like, the guys that are really good that can really execute? And he goes, man, those Truebill guys can really execute. Right? So you don't know. At the end of the day, you don't know. And stuff like that happens all the time. I have tons of stories like that. So we sold the company, and then this happened. This is right after. This is where we signed the term sheet, and this is what happened to our market right after that. We sold in cash, alhamdulillah. Okay? Our biggest competitor dropped 96%. Okay? SoFi dropped 70%, 80%. So people said this is one of the best time deals of all time. But alhamdulillah, right? You don't know. And, the company's doing well since then, and maybe it would have come back. But we don't regret doing that. Let's just put it that way. And so today, this year, we hit, in January, which is our high season, we hit the #1 app in the finance category. And number 8 in the entire App Store. So the app is doing very well if you guys want to play around with it. And, finally, look, at the end of the day, it's not me doing it, right? I mean, I'm a voice in the company and I'm leading it, but there is a team, and the team really matters. And what I would say to you that's different than what I speak to other audiences, how you treat them also really matters. Because I am running the company as a Muslim. Like, I make it clear that I'm a Muslim. Like, that's not hidden to people. And so that means they're also watching me of like, well, how does a Muslim conduct themselves? And in our first company at Webs, Vistaprint, who's the acquirer, decided to shut down all of their offices. So they were finally closing the old office. I had moved out long. We had left a long time before that. But they said we're going to have an office closing party, and they invited us. So we went back to our office. And in that office, the people that came to that party were not the current Vistaprint employees. It was all the people who were there at our time. And we went around and talked about that. What they talked about wasn't, oh, I made this money in the acquisition, or, I learned these things. It was like, I had never been treated like this before. I didn't know you could be treated like this at a company. I had never been given the level of respect for my own thoughts and ideas in a company. I'd never been given the deference. I had never been, in an environment that was so welcoming. And that is what actually really, really matters, is you get a chance not just to build a company, but you're touching all of these lives. I mean, they're spending more time with you than their husbands, than their wives, than their children, than their families, than anyone else, basically. Like, I get more of their time than anybody in their life gets. And so with that comes a responsibility of, like, how are you going to treat them? And so when we onboard people, I tell them, my commitment to you is that this is a place not just for you to get professional growth, but for you to grow personally as well. So that personal growth is your life, is actually your true life goal. And if you're going to be spending more than half your time here, then you need to be doing it here also. All right. That's the end. I just want to, if I have do I have any wiggle room here? 1 or 2 minutes?
We have time for one question, and maybe you pick out the person that screams loudest at you.
So I'm gonna pick on someone, but I'm gonna preempt a question because I get this all the time, which is, okay, so I'm still working, I'm still running the company, but I'm gonna leave, and it's like, what are you gonna do next? I always get that question, so I'm gonna answer it for you. I don't think I'm going to create another company myself, run another company myself. And the reason is because a company takes about 10 years, like end to end, generally speaking, and all of your time doing that. And so you can maybe do one, maybe if you're really good, you can do 2 at a time. And so it fundamentally doesn't scale. And so now I'm in a position where it's like, okay, well, how do I scale sort of all of these skills that I've done? And what I've realized you can do is there are people all over the place that are hyper confident, have something that's like they should be doing, that they should be doing, that's like almost their dharma, and then they're not doing it. And they're not doing it because there's some barrier to the way. And so what I've gotten involved in is getting in touch with those types of people and saying, okay, I'm going to remove all of this excuses so that this thing can become alive, this thing can happen. And so an example of that, after the Gaza war, Mehdi Hassan is a famous commentator on MSNBC. And his show got canceled after he did an interview with Mark Regev, that was like a hard-hitting interview. It wasn't even that hard-hitting, but anyway, they canceled his show, and they just said, we'll just pay you to do nothing. And so we were friends. He called me up, and he said, look, I think there's an opportunity to have like a new voice out there that's like brings this Muslim perspective, brings this like, pro-Palestinian perspective. What do you think? And I was like, look, if there's someone who could do that, it's you. Let's do it. And so I basically helped him raise the money for that, standup.org, helped him get the domain name, helped him, I sit on his board, and helped stand that up. So it's called Zeteo. You guys should all subscribe to it, zeteo.com on Substack. But it's those types of things where I can now spend, that's not going to that can take maybe 5 or 10% of my time and some, obviously some cash and resources and stuff, but you can probably do several of those a year and bring into existence a bunch of stuff that may not have existed otherwise. All right, we got right there. Walaikum salam.
Pro-IDF and everything.
They did.
So I'm just wondering, how do you handle that as a portfolio company for them? Can you talk to me about the personal challenges with that?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I sold the company before that happened, so they're not really like an investor per se anymore. But I'll tell you what I did. My partner who was on the deal, it wasn't him. I started texting him, and I was like, this is embarrassing. This is unbelievable that you guys are doing this. He's like, I don't know much about this issue. And I just kept sending him stuff, like whenever the news articles came out. And I was like, this is really, really bad. And he's like, okay, next time let's get together. We haven't sat down together yet, but I did that with that. I did it with my law firm too. I was like, oh, you guys said like you care about all life and you made a statement about Israel. Okay, now it's been 6 months. There's been all these massacres in Gaza. Are you going to make a statement or not? And they're like, no. And I'm like, right, so you don't care about all life. So I did actually call out people, but I did it through the personal relationships that I knew, as opposed to like calling out somewhere on Twitter or something like that. All right, sounds like I think they're trying to kick me off stage.
Thank you so much,
All
Haroon.
right.